Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something that I think is, well, it's basically a shortcut.
A shortcut to political trend casting, right?
Exactly. Our mission today is to take this stack of source material and track the pretty wild journey of these really niche, chaotic political memes and ideas.
The stuff that's, lurking in the deepest corners of the internet.
Yeah, and figure out exactly which of those fringe narratives are about to make the leap into, real-world political influence.
And this deep dive, it all starts with a fascinating map, an ethnography that was written back in 2018.
Okay, so a few years ago.
Right. And the researcher, they spent time just observing the mimetic and ideological activity of, get this, 12 to 17-year-olds.
Wow.
At the time, their focus was on this super niche post-left. We're talking about things like eco-anarchy, green anarchy, anti-industrial society movements. The whole point was early detection.
Finding these radical narratives when they were still small. And what's so compelling and what really hooked me is the shift in scale. I mean, those super specialized topics the researcher was watching, maybe a few hundred dedicated people saw them in 2018.
If that, yeah.
Today, those exact same narratives, the literal same memes and arguments, are reaching audiences in the hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions.
What started as these little micro trends have become full-on macro forces. It's the political trend casting model, but, for real. We are watching the future of politics get built by teenagers on Discord.
So let's get into the mechanics of that.
Okay, so when we talk about early detection, the key insight from the sources is it's not just about tracking normal cyclical trends.
The kind of bell curve thing where something gets big and then just fades out.
Exactly. It's about identifying a fundamental and underlying problem that gives the idea staying power. The sources call it a problem that won't easily go away.
And the number one example has to be downward mobility in the United States. According to the research, this has been a steady, persistent trend for most working people for, 40 years now?
About 40 years, yes. It's this quiet but constant political engine.
Right.
And Gen Z is facing a future where, by a lot of financial and economic metrics, they are expected to do, well, pretty grimly compared to the upward mobility that boomers, Gen X, even older millennials experience.
They were born into a world where the status quo is just visibly not working for them.
That's the structural issue. It validates and fuels their interest in looking for some kind of radical alternative.
But you could argue every generation has its own conflicts, its own hardships. Why does this moment of radicalism feel so much more intense?
It's a unique cocktail, really. 3 interconnected factors. First is just access to information.
Okay.
Where you or I might have had to go to a library, a university archive to dig into deep political history. Today, the internet is an infinite archive. All of it, instantly accessible.
And that access hit at the same time as this consensus breakdown, the historical grounding.
Exactly. For a little while after the Berlin Wall fell, there was this dominant idea, summed up by Francis Fukuyama in '92.
The end of history.
Right. The idea that liberal democracy was basically the end of the line, the final form of government. And that consensus, that there was no real alternative, it held from maybe '89 until the 2008 financial crisis.
And once the financial system broke, the consensus shattered.
It splintered fast. And that's when you see figures like Sanders on the left and Trump on the right emerge.
So you have a generation born into a world where the establishment has no political answers, but they have infinite access to every political answer ever thought of.
Which brings us to the third piece. The teenager effect. I mean, teenagers are just naturally wired to push boundaries, to be performative.
To test the fences, so to speak.
Yes. So you combine that natural impulse with infinite historical context and a total vacuum of political certainty. You get a media ecosystem that is chaotic, competitive, and it rewards the most extreme or shocking idea.
And that perfect storm creates this just massive volume of niche, extreme, hyper-specific ideologies being tested online all the time.
Oh, yeah. We see everything. Mega-communism, anarcho-primitivism, queer, anarcho-transhumanism.
Libertarian neo-monarchism, caliphatism.
Yeah.
The list is truly endless.
It is. And our researchers peer described this process perfectly. They use a GAN analogy.
Okay, hold on. For those of us not deep in AI terms, what's a GAN and how does that relate to all this?
A GAN is a generative adversarial network. So think of it like 2 AIs battling. One generates new images, and the other tries to spot if the image is fake or real.
Okay, I'm with you.
In this context, teenagers are constantly generating new, outrageous ideological combinations, like monarcho-syndicalism or something. Then they test those ideas against the real world, the digital ecosystem, to see what gets traction.
They're essentially brute forcing together combinations to find something, anything, that might scale up to solve the 21st century crisis.
That's it, exactly.
So after all that chaotic testing, what's actually sticking in the real world?
Well, if we look at the macro trend across the advanced world, Hungary, Poland, Italy, the US, the most obvious rising force is right-wing populism.
Which tracks perfectly with that 40-year neoliberal consensus we were talking about.
It does. The economic fallout from that has been so severe that you have groups that historically voted for labor interests now voting overwhelmingly for right-wing populists who promise a total break from the status quo.
And these digital movements are creating brand new versions of right-wing thought. The source specifically points to libertarian neo-monarchism as being in the ascendancy.
Which is a perfect example of a brute-forced combination. Right?
Totally. They also track the revival of paleoconservatism among young conservatives.
Yeah, and for listeners who might not follow all the flavors of American conservatism, the paleoconservative identity is really important. It's a direct rejection of the neoconservatism that dominated for so long.
Associated with Pat Buchanan historically.
Right. It's isolationist, nationalist, deeply skeptical of foreign wars. It's a powerful vehicle for anti-establishment anger today.
What's also fascinating is how this all manifests. It often becomes what the sources call an encyclopedic hobby.
Yes. It's like they prioritize rote knowledge, just memorizing the glossary definitions for 150 different conflicting political ideologies.
So the performance of knowing all the adisms becomes the goal.
It replaces any real strategic action or, frankly, moral engagement. Mastering the encyclopedia of politics becomes the work, not the messy, practical stuff of organizing.
And the sources followed one journey that shows just how quickly that rote knowledge can become, well, actionable.
It's a chilling example.
It started with some general lefty Bernie Sanders supporters, and over 2 years, the researcher tracked them as they moved across different platforms, different apps.
And they ended up in this tiny exclusive Discord server, maybe 100 people.
By the end, they weren't just debating theory. They were distributing writings from active eco-terrorist groups and sharing manuals for making IEDs.
And that kind of pathway for belief change, it absolutely exists. But this is where we have to be really critical of how the mainstream media uses the pipeline metaphor.
So how does the legacy media use that funnel idea opportunistically?
Well, they often use the pipeline idea to slander popular competing media entities, especially digital creators.
To delegitimize them.
Right, and to intentionally lump together a whole variety of different narratives that really shouldn't be connected. It's a tool to dismiss new political voices, and it distracts from the fact that all belief systems, including traditional political parties, are always changing.
And they're making these criticisms from a weaker and weaker position.
Yeah.
I mean, the so-called alt media is now quantitatively bigger than legacy media. The word alternative is becoming kind of ironic.
Totally. The legacy media is losing its monopoly. The news cycle is now reporting on what happens on the internet, not the other way around. The power has flipped.
And a lot of this initial testing, this transformation, it happens through irony.
Yes, through what's called irony poisoning. Someone might float a joke, say something extreme just to provoke a certain group.
Yeah, to piss off the libs or whatever.
Exactly. But years later, that joke gets internalized. It becomes a genuine belief. The satirical pose becomes the real political position.
But you've also said irony isn't always a bad thing. It can serve a real social function.
It can. Irony acts as a kind of safe space, especially in comedy or dark humor. It lets people transgress rules and talk about difficult, even awful things without immediate, severe social punishment. It's a way of testing the fences of acceptable debate.
And that ability to test ideas, to float opinions you might not even believe yet, is a core engine for ideological change. It lets marginal ideas slowly creep into the mainstream.
Which brings us to real-world power.
Right. The idea that these online groups are just echo chambers.
Right.
That's been completely debunked by the source material. These communities are absolutely shaping reality.
We have some powerful, concrete examples of this. There were these anarcho-communist Discord members.
Yeah.
They weren't just talking revolution. During the pandemic, they coordinated across different chapters and became these highly effective local mutual aid food pantries. They physically manifested their ideology.
And on the right, you have something like the America First Political Action Conference, AFPAC. It's an explicit example of reverse downloading life from the internet.
Taking digital narratives and creating a physical, real-world political event. But the most crucial example of this power might be the streamer Destiny.
What happened there?
During the Georgia Senate runoff, he mobilized his huge Twitch following to go out and canvass. His media entity got more people knocking on doors doing the physical work of politics than the official Democratic Party organization did.
I think we need to pause on that for a second. A single digital media personality out-mobilizing a major political party. That fundamentally changes the role of the party itself.
They're no longer the gatekeepers of organization. Not necessarily.
And this contrast in effectiveness brings us to the failures of some other activist tactics.
Yeah.
You know, the headline-grabbing stuff. Throwing soup on paintings, dyeing rivers green, gluing yourself to a road.
The source material is very clear that these tactics are, quote, politically ineffective.
Why is that?
Because they violate the cardinal rule of persuasion. Belief change has to happen step by step. These actions try to take someone from 0 to 10 on the belief scale immediately.
And that just doesn't work.
It backfires. It doesn't persuade, it alienates, it makes the average person dig their heels in and see the activists as lunatics instead of even considering the message.
Which opens up this huge opportunity for anyone who can position themselves as anti-establishment. People are willing to listen to ideas from the left or the right.
As long as it's not the establishment center, as long as it's not the neoliberal Clinton-era consensus, opposition to that is the key political synthesis of our time.
And we saw this play out with that surprising voter crossover in New York.
It was fascinating. A non-insignificant number of people voted for Donald Trump in 2024 and then turned around and voted for the Democratic Socialist State Assemblyman Mamdani in 2025.
Two figures who are ideologically poles apart.
But to those voters, they're both seen as necessary anti-establishmentarian wrecking balls. They're both ready to change a status quo that's been failing for decades. That shared opposition is the real engine right now.
So we have to turn to some of the darker narratives coming from the radical left now. Eco-extremism and neo-Malthusianism.
This is a complex ideology, and it's rooted in deep ecology. Proponents basically conclude that any reform is impossible, that organized society itself has to be dismantled.
Tracing the problem all the way back to the rise of agriculture, or at least the Industrial Revolution.
Yes, they completely reject humanist values.
And the conclusion they draw from that is pretty chilling.
It is. They adopt antinatalist politics. They explicitly prioritize the planet over human beings. Their solution to scarcity and climate change is simple and brutal. Get rid of a lot of people.
It's an ideology born of pure despair. The conviction that humanity itself is the problem.
Exactly. And compounding these issues on the left is a problem with organization. The sources note that the current institutional left, which they label the mangoes, media, academics, NGOs, government non-elected sectors, and other elite sectors,
Got it.
that whole ecosystem is just not scalable, and it doesn't provide a welcoming place to organize, especially for young men. Well, this elite group often uses rhetoric that the sources call casual misandry and vicious activist language. So when young men are looking for structure, for a place to organize for political change, they're often actively driven away from these left-wing groups. They feel like their concerns are just not important.
Which is a huge contrast to historical success, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the left historically won its demands through robust trade union organization.
Absolutely. U.S. union density was once 31%. Now it's around 11%.
And the nature of work itself has changed.
It has. The offshoring of organizable blue-collar jobs, physically moving boxes in a factory, to our current knowledge economy, which is mostly moving numbers on Slack, has removed that key centralized place for organizing working men.
It's worth pointing out that this crisis is so deep, even those on the right are signaling it. We're seeing young conservatives shift their economic views away from free market libertarianism towards a more nationalist populism.
And that's a tectonic shift. When the rights, who were historically the champions of the free market, are openly saying that the market organization of society is too asymmetrical, that it needs radical state intervention. That's a signal.
It tells you the downward mobility crisis is undeniable across the entire political spectrum.
It really is.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Our core finding is really a synthesis of this whole journey we've tracked, from a niche digital meme to national policy. The overriding political engine right now, it isn't left versus right.
It's anti-establishmentarianism.
Exactly. What we've seen is that the chaos and the brutal efficiency of the internet are turning these marginal fringe ideas into a central, unified anti-establishment force. It doesn't matter if the idea is packaged as left or right. This force is what's breaking open conversations that were previously gatekept by legacy media and the old political class.
And this raises an important question for you to consider. It's really at the heart of the current economic conflict. When we talk about the radical left, the conversation always seems to be about what they want to take away.
Right. Less consumption, no hamburgers, no airplanes.
But the real discussion should be about organizational competitiveness. Could social democratic organization, like a national health service or nationalized infrastructure, could it actually be more competitively efficient, more cost-saving than our current neoliberal model?
Can social organization actually beat the market on efficiency and cost, especially in huge spending areas like healthcare?
That is the economic challenge of our time.
That is a thought worth sitting with. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.